Chapter 28 The Inquisition. The Inquisition has long been synonymous with torture, organized evil, and the misuse of religion. The works of Henry Charles Lee, in particular, The Inquisition of the Middle Ages, 1888, have given us massive details of its horrors. In recent years, however, the long-standing impression has begun to fade for a variety of reasons. Among the central ones is, first, the obvious fact that the mass slave labour camps of the Marxist empire, the tortures, mass murders, and more of such states, as well as the evils of National Socialism, has made the Inquisition pale by comparison. The 20th century has little grounds for condemning past evils in the face of its own monstrous evils. Second, various studies have shown that the Inquisition was faced with very real evils: cults given to human sacrifice, cannibalism, and other practices. Thus, the historian Geoffrey Burton Russell, who began with a conventional view of the medieval era, confessed to a changed perspective in his Witchcraft in the Middle Ages, 1972. Moreover, some of Lee's premises have of late been questioned, as witness Richard Kuykerheffer's Repression of Heresy in Medieval Germany, 1979. However, an evil is not excusable on the grounds of being a lesser evil. The Inquisition had its formal beginning in 1233 when Pope Gregory IX commissioned some Dominicans to investigate the Albigenses in southern France. We cannot, however, read back into this beginning its later practices. At the same time, we cannot overlook the civil origins of the later Inquisition. In France, the Albigensian heresy was for some time seen as a serious problem by the crown. Thus, in 1226, Louis VIII had decreed civil punishment for excommunicated persons, and more than a few royal acts preceded the later Inquisition. Religious heresy tended to be associated with social and political turmoil, and was thus of concern to rulers for political, not theological reasons. As Kuykheffer summed it up, quote, "Whether genuinely heretical or not, religious deviants were seen as a threat to society." End quote. We should remember that only papal approval at times protected new Catholic orders from repressive hostilities. Roman Catholic historians have long pointed out that, officially, the Church did not sentence heretics to death or to the stake. It simply found them guilty of heresy, and the state did the rest. The state was usually eager to execute the heretics. Very often, only a small minority of those tried by the Church for heresy were actually excommunicated. The seizure of the condemned person's properties was a great inducement to state action. For any religious or political deviation, a guilty man forfeited his assets. We can perhaps understand better the reason for, as well as the error of, the Inquisition by looking at modern parallels to the Inquisition. Marxists and socialists generally see all capitalism as evil, hence all who are capitalists, all who believe in capitalism, and all whose actions can remotely be called capitalistic are condemned, imprisoned, or executed. Likewise, many people in the United States regard communism as an evil. It is clear that many communists have been involved in subversive activities. Some would have it that all communists without exception should be condemned and dealt with. The same can be said with regards to anti-Semites, Ku Klux Klan members, Nazis, fascists, Moonies, and other groups. Very definitely the same was said in the Middle Ages of Albigensians, for example. They were dualists. They despised the flesh and thus placed all sexuality, marital, adulterous, homosexual, bestial, and incestuous on a common level. Some showed their contempt for Christian morality by practicing illicit forms of sexuality. They despised authorities. They were contemptuous of cleanliness, and they were anything but the people of song and laughter modern myth has made of them. As Latoury summed it up, quote, because everything was forbidden, one act was no worse than another. End quote. In brief, in each case, because a position, view, or group is seen as evil, all within the group are judged worthy of condemnation. The law, when godly, condemns acts, not private opinions. While it is true that there is a clear relationship between faith and life, between beliefs, opinions, ideas, and actions, only God is capable of judging the as yet unrealized act, the belief. As a result, murder and adultery in the heart are called evil by Scripture, Matthew 5:21-28, but only the murderous and adulterous acts can be dealt with by civil courts. The state, however, as it grows in power, has also always grown in its demands for uniformity and conformity. We have seen in this century in the United States both segregation and legalized integration. Interracial marriages have been both banned and legalized. In any case, the thing avoided has been free association in terms of religious premises. At the same time, we have seen a growing permissiveness with respect to immoral acts, that is, acts which are not in terms of biblical law, and a lack of permissiveness with regard to Christian freedom, that is, the persecution of Christian churches, their schools and agencies. To return now to the Inquisition, the Inquisitor Nicholas, Bishop of Nazareth, gave John Huss a certificate of his orthodoxy before Huss went to the Council of Constance. The Council of Constance was notable for the fact that civil authorities and academicians dominated it. The Emperor Sigismund, who had given Huss a safe conduct, proved himself Huss's greatest enemy. Sigismund, when he thought the Czechs had left the council session, declared, quote, you have heard of many and heavy crimes which are not only proved against Huss by reliable witnesses, but also confessed by him. I deem that each one of them is worthy of death. If he does not retract, I am of the opinion that he should be burnt. But even if he does what he is told to do, even if he retracts, do not believe him. I should not believe him. I advise that he be not allowed to teach or preach in the kingdom of Bohemia. End quote. This was the same Sigismund and council which felt it necessary to defend as a true pope John the 23rd against Huss. Any other person than John the 23rd would have paid with his life for his crimes. It was attested before the Council of Constance by witnesses that John the 23rd had poisoned his predecessor, Pope Alexander V, that he had bought his cardinal's office, that he neither fasted nor prayed, that he was a murderer, a poisoner, a heretic who had denied the resurrection of the body and immortality of that for 6,000 gulder he had appointed a 5-year-old child preceptor of the Order of St. John, that he had sold extreme unction, absolution, indulgences, and so on, 72 articles of specific charges. John the 23rd was briefly imprisoned, set aside, and later declared an anti-pope. Before his death, John the 23rd was again a high-ranking churchman. Out of office, John the 23rd was no problem to the emperor. Huss, however, and his opinions constituted a threat to the unity of Sigismund's realm. There is little difference in principle between the condemnation of Huss by Sigismund and the Council of Constance and the seizure of the English monasteries and foundations by Henry VIII. Many Protestants condemn the burnings of Huss and approve Henry VIII's seizure of the monasteries, and many Catholics see the burning of Huss as an unhappy necessity and Henry VIII's act as an evil. Both, however, surrender principle in so doing. The state is not interested in either a dissenting power or a reforming power. Both constitute an evil to the state and a hindrance to its drive for sovereign power. As a result, the state is history's major inquisitor and inquisitorial power. It is clearly true that the states of history have at times used the Church or have convinced the Church of the validity of their position, and the Church has been compliant to such activities. In 1839, the Marquis de Custine, in his travels in Russia, noted the very great piety of the Russian people. At the same time, he saw the captivity and low estate of the Orthodox Church reduced to being a national church in the service of the state. He observed, quote, "National churches make citizens, the universal church makes men," end quote. When the state triumphs over and uses the church, state law replaces God's law because law has its source always in the sovereign power. Where the sovereign power is God, biblical law prevails. Where the sovereign power is the state, humanistic law rules. The result is the triumph of the inquisitorial mentality. God's absolute government is the source of all creation and of all events. The Council of Jerusalem declared, quote, "Known unto God are all his works from the foundation of the world," Acts 15:18. Because of his predestination, foreknowledge, and providence, the triune God does not need to enter with coercion into history to accomplish his will. When the state plays God, it has no alternative other than coercion to effect its will. The results are history.